Leani felt off by the latest development over the past 3 weeks. Not the matters of the royal family or the war or the monster sightings. These developments were the odd kind, the kind she never bothered with, even when adventuring. These developments were because of the 25 recruits of the army she and Jason were building. 25 younger, prettier, and eager female recruits, each constantly making efforts to win over Jason. And while she did join the training and acted as the check for the ones that were, as Jason put it, cheating, she still felt off by it all, even after she had witnessed the way he acted towards them. He has maintained a respectful distance and has refused a few outright after some more bold attempts. His actions towards her haven't changed either, still ready and willing to listen to her and make plans to set up the army or find the limits of the recruits, but still maintained a respectful air between the two of them. She wasn't sure what to do, but kept watching as the recruits were doing their shooting practice. Each was given a M401, which, according to Jason, was the standard weapon of the army, and was the battle staff he had used when he first arrived, and she even learned how it worked a bit. The real reasons she was here and watching will likely be the same reason most of the recruits were slacking off. It was hot today, summer was around the corner, and the suns were bearing down hard, and Jason, in a show of either not understanding decorum or did, and was dressed like this intentionally, was dressed in a shirt that was already hugging his skin and gave everyone a show of the tone form of his chest and abdomen. While she did enjoy the show, her eyes landed on one recruit who was now actively not practicing, and said recruit was staring at Jason as he was very actively dressing down a different one for nearly shooting her teammate. Picking up her radio, she pressed the button down and spoke to Jason. "Recruit Cone is staring at you again." She notices him snap his head and point a hand at the recruit, and in a loud and commanding voice, one that carried up and out the firing range he had built, spoke, "Kaun, your accuracy is still too low for you to be staring like an apprentice. Get more bullets down range, use them or lose them." Kaun, a bit startled, quickly turned back to the target and started shooting again. But Jason turned back to the recruit he was lecturing, ending it with a pat on the shoulder and likely a few words of encouragement. He planned to get these 25 into soldiers of an acceptable quality, then set them up with 5 acting as leaders, and the other 20 split under them, and have them train the rest of the soldiers. While they acted as the overall command, but according to him, it's taking longer than he wanted. The first week was terrible for the recruits, and she was sure at least all of them had tried in vain to use magic to get him, mainly to get him to ease up on the week-long physical training he had them doing. After that first week, he eased up and added lessons on combat tactics and weapons usage, along with lessons on the usage of the equipment he had provided all of them, which included A-plate carrier, helmet, radio, grenades, and the war carriage, which are called Humvees, and she learned how to use one while he taught them. But this was the end of the third week, and he had hoped they would be ready by now for, as he put it, a milk run. She noticed him looking exhausted and shaking at his shirt, likely to cool himself off, before he called a stop and told them to rack their weapons, go get some food, and go to the classroom after. The recruits did as told. For the most part, a few asked to keep practicing, but she saw the sour notes on their face as he likely told them not to. She can't say she was surprised. He was a hard drill master and never let them act much on their initiative. As he turned and started walking away from the firing range, she noticed the tiredness on his face. The past 3 weeks were harsh on him most of all, between the lack of sleep from eager recruits and the constant need to keep an eye on them while they learned to use their weapons. He looked drained, and the heat of the day was also bad for him. She was nice and cool thanks to magic, but he couldn't use it. Instead, he walked up to the table she was sitting at and took up the jug she was keeping cold, poured out a cup for himself, and drank deeply. Leani failed not to stare at him as he drank, but looked away as he finished and started to take short sips of his second cup. "So, how are they doing?" Leani asked as she carefully looked a bit away to hide her blush. Jason let out a sigh and took a deep breath. "I want to have them get their feet wet with a fight, but they are only now realizing that those weapons are dangerous." He said back and turned and watched the recruits. "But they are taking to the lessons well, and all of them understand how to use the Humvees, and they are getting used to running with their kits on, too." Leani thought it over. Over the last 3 days, 3 of the recruits had to make visits to the temples. 2 had gotten themselves shot in the arm, and 1 lost her finger when her battle staff went off. But Leani also remembered how quickly Jason treated them, to the point where getting to the temple was possible on foot, not that they walked there. Yeah, I have been keeping an eye out for potential fights or minor battles they can have, but with everything I have seen, they are not likely to win, she finally said back and glanced over the recruits, a bit sorrowful over their slow progress. It's okay. I was overestimating them, Jason said back in a comforting tone. The fact they have come this far on the flying beast excrement of a training schedule is commendable. Leani looked up at him, a bit surprised. What? She asked, a bit bewildered. Yeah, basic training is meant to take 22 weeks, and more to get the amount of training I got, Jason said back calmly, before drinking his cup of water dry and pouring a new cup. Leani found herself staring at the boggling amount of training he got just to be a soldier, and according to him, he had served and survived for 7 years after that. But as he suddenly looked towards the gates and reflexively reached for his sidearm, she was snapped out of her haze. Looking back, she saw the rider that had just shown up, a rider carrying the heraldry of her sister, the heraldry of the newly minted crown princess, and the rider was looking around pointedly. Follow but don't fight. It's a messenger from the new crown princess, Leani said and got up. Watching the rider carefully as they approached, the rider was a young girl, likely in her early 30s to 40s. She is a messenger. She looks like she is 12? Jason asked quickly. Leani lost her stride and looked back to him and took an expression he had used a few times, one brow cocked and pointed at him. What? She looks like she is 12. I mean, yeah, I have seen 12-year-olds ride small beast for riding, but they aren't royal messengers, he said in a slightly uneasy tone. Jason, how old do you think I am? Leani asked in a sharp tone. I don't know, maybe like mid-20, I think, he said nervously. Must be a racial thing then, she is likely mid-30. Leani then turned a bit back and added, and I am not that young. Leani's mind ended up drifting elsewhere while they walked over to the messenger. She had heard him claim to be 29 a few weeks ago, but thought it was a jest to anger her late sister. Now she wasn't so sure, moreover the new question of how long he can live cropped up. Locking her eyes on the messenger, she recognized her. She was one of the daughters of a rising lady whose army was successfully defending her domain, if only just. The messenger spoke up as soon as they had both reached earshot. 12th princess, the crown princess, has decided to grace your... She glanced about before looking back. Army with her presence, she will be visiting in 2 weeks. Be ready to demonstrate the power you plan to lead to her plans for this war. She said then, wheeled her mount and rode off. Leani was pissed off by that, and the thought of having Jason shoot down the rider crossed her mind, but shook it free and turned to Jason. How old are you? She asked directly. 29, he said with a bit of embarrassment. But you look older, so I guess it is a difference between our races. Leani then turned and walked away quickly. Whoa, wait a tick, Jason said, then ran up. You say that, but why is this so important? How long can your kind live for anyway? Leani stopped. Her mind thought about it, but wanted her answer first. Biting her lip to suppress her emotions, she turned to face him. You first. How long can your kind live for? Jason slowed, then stopped. He watched her carefully, clearly trying to read her expression. 80 or 90 on average, but some can live longer with a healthy lifestyle. Leani failed to suppress her shudder as her eyes went wide. His race lives for 1/10 of hers, and they are still capable of combat and thought. The understanding of the world is the longer you live, the stronger and more capable you are. And she was only in her early 70s. She still had a lifetime to master more skills and gain power. But he has already lived 1/3 of his life, and she will outlive him by a few centuries. She shook her head and shut her eyes, not wanting to think about this, and not now. But a pulse ran through her as his hand touched her cheek, and his voice called out. You live longer than I do, don't you? He asked in that calm and gentle voice he had used after they had dealt with her late sister. That comforting tone made her feel like things would be all right. She nodded slowly as her cheeks felt the heat of his body, the hot day's suns still building up his core temperature. I am not going to ask how long or what your age is, but I will do my best not to judge with my eyes, however. I want you to know it will be an honor to serve you," he said, before pulling his hand away. She opened her eyes and looked a bit up at him. His expression was a reassuring one he had given her a few times, a look of faith in her. Leani nodded and smiled. "Right, sorry about that. My kind can live for about 10 times yours, and I'm only now truly into my adulthood. But I will do everything in my power to make your final years comfortable, as long as you keep your promise to me." She had expected a curt nod or a quick affirmation, but instead she got something far more. Jason looked confused for half a second, then went to a knee, head bent down. "I, Jason Coleman, hereby pledge my life in service of Leani Wizaldtrix to act as her bannerman in times of war, and her advisor in times of peace, to never raise my arm against her or her heiresses, to stand and hold against all that would threaten her, and to carry out her orders without question. I make this pledge in sound mind and body. I will live as her blade in the darkness, the watcher on her walls, and the shield that guards her realm. I pledge my life and honor to her until its end." Leani was left stunned and swallowed hard before reaching down to his shoulder. She wasn't sure if his pledge would hold in her nation, but a pledge is a pledge, and as a princess, she had her part to play. "I, Leani Wizaldtrix, accept your pledge, and will vow to act as a just and fair mistress over you, to guard and protect your home, and to hold you for as long as you are loyal." She took a step back. "Now rise as a knight of my household and take your place beside me as we march onward." Jason rose slowly, with the warmest smile his still sweaty form could manage, but the moment was interrupted as a slew of calls and cheers came from the side, where the whole gaggle of recruits had watched the whole thing. Leani smiled and softly spoke. "Stun grenades." Jason didn't hesitate and pulled his sidearm free, repeating her words, and started firing as soon as the oversized handheld battle wand beeped and spoke. "Stun ready." Firing 3 stun grenades at the recruits, most of whom had the good sense to run back around the corner. This new weapon was a rulings giver, he claimed, but the sheer number of different magic shots it could use left her skeptical, to say the least.